what a marathon, right? I don't know if my students back at Benedictine have this kind of stamina to keep going 4 nights in a row. So I really appreciate you all. I have loved being here in Hayes. I've loved the people. It's really my first time kind of spending time here in Hayes, and you all have something really good going on here, whether it's the university or just the town. So thank you for your hospitality. So we'll wrap up L&R, Love and Hospitality, in the first session. We've got some stuff coming back in the second one. I thought, if I could, just briefly, just want to kind of share my story with y'all, my conversion story. I've kind of mentioned it here and there, but the reason is these things aren't just ideas for me. I mean, these are some of the things that changed my life. I grew up in Dayton, Ohio. I grew up Catholic, but Catholic in name only, maybe a little bit more than Christmas and Easter, but it didn't really mean a thing to me, to be honest with you. I came to Benedictine College as a student for one reason, that was I wanted to play football. My high school, I mean, you can kind of sum it up in chasing after football, parties, girls, image, tattoo on spring break, and a nipple ring. And then I came to college. That's where I was. That was my life. And freshman year, Benedictine, things seemed like they were going well. I made the travel squad as a freshman. I made the 48-man playoff roster as a freshman. I thought I had everything that I wanted. But yet I knew something was missing, because my life, my world went up and down with how my times were, my weights, my playing time. Everything on the outside determined how I was doing. Fast forward to May of my freshman year, and we played an exhibition game in Paris, France, of all things. So there I am, and my legs really are taken out from beneath me in more ways than one. I broke my leg, broke my fibula over in Paris, France. And my world for me at the time just crushed, because who I am, identity, everything that makes me tick is just gone. And so that summer just kind of sank into a depression. Just before that happened, in spring semester of my freshman year, I had 2 theology classes with a certain Dr. Sri. And I was intrigued up here, but it hadn't gone down to my heart yet. But we kind of hit it off, and I came back my sophomore year, so after the leg broke in May of my freshman year, and we went out to lunch to McDonald's in August, the beginning of my sophomore year, and I fired questions left and right. Is this right? Is this wrong? What about this? What about that? He's like, I'm teaching this class called Christian Moral Life. It's full, but if you'd like, I'll let you in. It seems like it'd be right up your alley. Well, Dr. Sri, everything, I've taken 17 hours right now. Everything I'm taking I need. Can I think about it and call you tomorrow? Sure. Well, I redshirted that season because I didn't want to waste a year of eligibility, not having trained all summer. So I had more time, took that class. And I can't explain it, but you walk into a class like that, Christian Moral Life, and you think it'll be a bunch of rules. Bible says this, that, can't do this, church says this. I just couldn't have been more wrong. It's about freedom, friendship, happiness, virtue. All of a sudden I could see this is why you're not happy, because you're made for something greater. And so I started to kind of understand what was going on, got involved in focused Bible study, kind of around a different group of guys, and I could tell they had something that I didn't. They had a stability and a peace and a happiness that wasn't simply fluctuating with how things are going on the outside. But at this point, there's still one thing left that I wasn't ready to give over to our Lord, and that was a relationship with a girlfriend back at Ohio University. And I remember kind of fumbling through prayers, and I had already reached out to me at this time. Here, fall of my sophomore year, he said, I'm going to teach you how to pray the rosary. He had to correct me on the words of the Hail Mary. 12 years of Catholic education, that's where I was. I remember kind of fumbling through prayers in October of my sophomore year, asking the Lord in my own kind of fumbling way, should I leave this relationship? I remember saying almost audibly, no matter what you say, I'm not going to do it. And I can't explain it, but 2 months later, I just had this inexorable certainty that this was the last thing holding me back, for her sake and for mine, of the life that I was so yearning to live. And walked away from that relationship that Christmas break, and all my high school friends just spread all kinds of rumors. I mean, it just, what happened to Swafford? And I never felt more alone, but more at peace that Christmas break. And I sat down and read the Gospels all the way through, not for a class, but just on my own. And like I said, never felt more alone, but more at peace in my life. And that spring semester, it was like gas on a fire. You just couldn't shut me up, because I found something. I found a faith that was really worth living for, that was worth even dying for it. I had never encountered something like that before. And lo and behold, now my wife transferred into Benedictine the following fall. So I look back and I really see the Lord kind of preparing me to meet her. Because she never had to ask herself, is this conversion about her or is it sincere because it happened before I met her? So these things that we're going through, they're not just ideas for me. They changed my life. And encountering Jesus and in building friendships based on this and building a marriage based on that was just transformative. And I've never looked back for a second. And if I could, just by way of kind of practical counsel, especially to my college students and the like that are here. When Sarah and I started dating, I didn't know if she was the one, but I knew that she was the kind of person that I wanted to marry. I didn't know if it was her in particular, but I knew she had the character of what I was looking for. I'd encourage you, it's one thing to go to coffee and to get to know someone, but don't date someone that you couldn't see yourself marrying. And ultimately, when all is said and done, the litmus test, I think, is this. Would you trust this person with your kids if something happened to you? Because it's easy to be like, I'll balance things out. But at the end of the day, do you have the confidence to say, I trust this person to be the sole influence over my kids if something happens to me? If you can say yes to that, you've got gold. You've got gold. Our first slide up here, these are some of the things that I'm talking about. Aristotle, long ago, the great pagan philosopher, gives us three kinds of friendships that I think pretty well sum up most of our experience. Friendship of pleasure, utility, and then virtuous friendship. These two are not bad. There's nothing wrong with them, they're just not as deep. And again, as I said a couple times, a friendship is as deep as the good that binds you. What unites you, in a friendship of pleasure, this is how it typically starts. You enjoy each other's companies. You might enjoy the same activity. They're pleasant to be around. Utility, there's a usefulness, right? It's kind of a business relationship, or maybe you help this person study, and they think about Rudy, right? Okay, so I'll help you study, you take me to the park. It's something like that, but the point is what unites them is the usefulness to each other. Aristotle calls virtuous friendship complete friendship because it's not as if you don't like being around each other if you're in a virtuous friendship. And a virtuous friend is useful in the most ultimate sense because they're helping you get to your ultimate end. So it's complete in that what's good about the other two is also subsumed here, but it's more. The friend becomes another self, where you will their good as if it is your own. I've said this a couple times too. Virtuous friendship is about something. It's not just two people running at each other. You're running to a goal together, especially a transcendent goal, especially in a Christian context. You're running to Jesus together. You're journeying together, and you're accompanying each other together, and you're sharing life together. My wife has kind of summed this up, I think, in a pretty pithy and powerful way. Accountability, vulnerability, and availability. In a virtuous friendship, you love the other enough to speak the hard truths. You love them enough to say, look, it's not just you do you, it's you do you informed by truth and virtue. And that's very different. It changes how love works out. Because it's not, well, if it makes you happy, it's, well, brother, I love you enough to say you're better than that, to call you out. So there's an accountability there. Think about this as a workout partner in the game of life. What kind of workout partner do you want? Do you want one that's going to push you? Or do you want one that's going to kind of, maybe I'll get around to it. These other two, I think, are important because a virtuous friendship is not simply, you can have goodwill from afar. You can respect and admire someone from afar, but you're not sharing life together. So there has to be and for Aristotle, he says, actually, you can have as many virtuous friends as you can live with. Now, exactly what he means by that is debated, but it's a small number when all is said and done. And when you get to the kind of friendship he's talking about, It's not a ton of people. It's a small number that becomes the other self that you share life with, that you journey to a goal with. And again, marriage becomes the most outstanding exemplar of what this is about. You ever be real with each other? And you spend time together. You make each other a priority. So it's not just respect, it's not just admiring the other from afar, it's sharing life together. So another self, about something, share life together. Again, in my wife's words, accountability, vulnerability, and availability. That's kind of, I think, a modern, pithy way to sum up what Aristotle is getting at. Now, what I want to now, these are some things that we skipped over in Love and Responsibility he discussed earlier in the book. But what I want to hit is this. We've spent a lot of time talking about how love is an act of the will. Love is not really a feeling. As Bishop Barron once put it, love can be accompanied by feelings, but it's not itself a feeling. And that's the great lie of our age. That love ultimately is an act of the will, where you put the good of the other first and foremost. That's absolutely right. But as I said last night, I think Catholics sometimes swing the pendulum too far. In that Catholics sometimes say, well, the culture says love's an emotion. We say it's an act of the will. And we sometimes neglect the importance of the emotional aspect. I want you to see the balance in what Wojtyła gives you here. So I won't go through all this, but he uses these words, sympathy and friendship, and he's moving to the context of a romantic relationship. But really this applies to friendship in general. By sympathy, he basically means that affective connection, where someone can, think about those friends when you're telling a story, and they can kind of feel the up and the down with you. They share in your sorrow, they share in your victories. You don't have to explain it because they're almost feeling it with you as you're saying it. Does that make sense? That's what he means by sympathy. Here, the way he's using the word. It's kind of an affective connection where you're kind of moving in each other's emotional orbit. Now, obviously, that by itself falls prey to all the problems of purely affective, purely emotional love. But watch what he does with this, though. Well, that'll be the next slide. What he means by friendship here in this context is when the will comes in. So in friendship, again, unlike sympathy, again, what he means by sympathy here is the emotional connection. What he means by friendship here is when you have an act of goodwill that is concerned for their good. So that's how he's using these words here. Friendship, the participation of the will is decisive. I want the good for you as much as I want it for myself. Your good becomes my good. I am as concerned about what's objectively good and best for you as if it were my own good. So what he means here is friendship, the will comes in, sympathy, the emotional, affective connection. From the point of the education of love, a clear postulate emerges here. Sympathy must be transformed into friendship. So you'd expect him to say that at this point. And friendship complemented with sympathy. For without sympathy, friendship would remain cold. Again, this is the mistake I think Catholics sometimes make. They say the culture says love is an emotion, we say it's an act of the will. But here's the thing. The will is primary. The will is first. Whether it's a romantic relationship, whether it's a spouse, whether it's a friendship, the will is, once the will's there, once the will is committed to the good of the other, at that point, there needs to be an act of the will to intentionally connect emotionally with the other. Did you catch that? It's an act of charity. It's an act of love to connect at the affective and emotional level. And to do so intentionally and make that a priority. I promise you this can change your marriage someday. It's not enough to simply have goodwill from a cold and distant place. It's an act of love, it's an act of the will, it's an act of charity to make it a priority to maintain and build up even that affective emotional connection. Does that make sense? You may have friends that you probably think about different friends that you have. Some that feel things with you. They share in your joys, they share in your sorrows. And others that you're kind of always having to explain yourself to them. There's an emotional kind of distance. Same thing, friends, parent to child. This is kind of an anecdote, kind of a tangent on the side, but maybe it's worth mentioning briefly. There was an extended study a couple years that came out a couple years ago on what passes the faith on from one generation to the next. And what they found, the sociological study, is that the number one correlating factor they claimed across the board over a multi-generation study was even more than the piety of the parents, was the emotional intimacy between the parent, especially the father, and the kids. If that emotional connection was there, the kids were far more likely to maintain the faith of the father, the faith of the parents. That's the kind of thing I'm getting at, and all I'm saying here is, yes, the will is primary. Yes, it cannot simply be about emotions. But once you have that context, once the primacy of the will is there, you have to double back and make an intentional priority to connect at the emotive and affective level. That's what he's getting at here. Does that make sense? Without sympathy, without that emotional connection, friendship will remain cold. So the culture is wrong to say love is simply a feeling, but the answer is not to say emotional connection has nothing to do with it. A partial truth, if claimed to be absolute, is false, but a partial truth may still capture a partial truth. This is much the same idea. He uses a different word here toward the end of the text called tenderness. And what you'll find is what he means by sympathy, affectivity, and tenderness are more or less the same thing. Maybe different stages, maybe different relationships, but you're talking about that affective, emotional connection. The ability to co-feel, a sensitiveness to the other's lived experience. Tenderness grows from feeling the interior situation of the other. And he's going to be alert to the same kind of dangers we looked at before. So this closeness proceeds from affective commitment. Tenderness demands some vigilance, so that its diverse manifestations do not acquire a different meaning. Basically, and you've all probably seen this before, when someone is kind of overly familiar, overly touchy, too quick, too fast, it starts to raise some suspicions. That's what he's getting at here. So that they do not become merely forms of satisfying sensuality. Yeah, that's my fault. No, you're good. Tenderness cannot do without cultivated interior self-mastery. See, one has to be a custodian of themselves, self-mastery, in order to truly love. It's self-mastery that leads to self-give. Therefore, true human love has to join itself in two moments of tenderness, so that think of the emotive, affective, and of a certain firmness. And what he means by that is an anchor in objective truth. Because if you're anchored in the truth, you're anchored in having concern for their objective good. Again, feelings can be wonderful, but they can deceive. They can deceive. It's not their job to identify the truth. But when you're anchored in the truth, they can make your pursuit of the true and the good all the more vivid and powerful at an experiential level. This is good. In other words, it's best not just to do a virtuous action, but it's best to be excited about it with all the emotional gusto that you can have. Emotions are not bad, they just have to be ordered, they have to be channeled. Okay, let's. This is the same. Tenderness is too easy, especially so-called mawkishness, does not induce deep trust, but contrary arouses suspicion. That's what we were getting at earlier. This kind of sums it up. We must pay attention to the fact that all love between a woman and a man, including the one that both intend to be true and honest, so even a good and wholesome one where both parties are trying to be virtuous, in general, develops in such a way that its subjective profile, so by that he means the feelings or the experience of love, the whole psychological analysis we talked about last night, the physical attraction, emotional attraction, the experience of love, the feelings of love, all of that gets going faster than the objective profile. The anchor in the objective truth, objective good, commitment, virtue. Right? Again, how does it start? I'm attracted, flirt, romance, chemistry, all that gets out way in front of my sincere commitment for the good of the other. And this is the great task of love. The great task of love is to not allow the experience of love to run on its own, but allow it to be conformed to virtue. In fact, subordinated to virtue. Tenderness is the ability to feel the whole man, the whole person, and all even the most hidden movements of his soul, but always bearing in mind the true good of that person. So all this is review from last night, but you see that for him, the emotional aspect is not bad. It only becomes problematic if it runs on autopilot, if it runs the show by itself. But if it is anchored in the truth, if it is anchored in the objective good, not only is it not bad, it's good and actually should be positively fostered. That's the point that I think a lot of Catholics forget, because I think it's an overreaction against the culture. Does that make sense? Do you see the balance here? If you ever pick up The Jeweler's Shop, which again, that's the text I typically turn to next, which he wrote at the exact same time, that play that he wrote is fundamentally about this tension and this dynamic. The progress and growth of love and all the ebb and flow and up and down and the turbulence of human dysfunction as it exists everywhere, and the tension between will and emotion as the great task of love. So think about all these things. It's a great read. It's a quick read. It's deceptively simple. It's about 3 couples, and really it's very much about 3 couples at different stages. One with a love that survives the grave, another one that is on the rocks, and another one that has been wounded by their upbringing but has great hope of redemption. It's very raw and real. What my students typically say about this, I just can't believe how real this is. It's not preachy, but it's real, and it challenges nonetheless. What we have next is to kind of go right after the kind of sexual ethics and the like. So that's the next phase of the book. So this first part is review from last night, but he says this explicitly here, page 204. Sexual intercourse outside marriage, ipso facto, places one person in the position of an object of use for another person. In other words, sexual activity outside of marriage is always using. Because what's happening is you're placing your subjective and physical and emotional experience above the objective good of the other. It's helpful to have an axiom like this, and an axiom, something that is claimed to be true always and everywhere, can sound harsh, but it can save you so much heartache. Because when you're in the thick of it, everybody's got an excuse for why their situation is different, why the general rule doesn't apply to me here and now. He's convinced, and he's exactly right, that any sexual activity outside of marriage is always using. You can't look me in the eye and say, I'm doing this because I'm first and foremost concerned about what's objectively best for the other person. Rather, you're prioritizing the physical and emotional experience over the good of the other, and therefore it's always using, always and everywhere. Axioms like that are hard and tough, yes, but think about how liberating and freeing they are to have such clarity, because clarity will give you confidence and conviction. Wobbly squeamishness will get you ensnared in all kinds of knots. The confidence of the truth will save you a lot of heartache. That was a review from last time. Okay, I'll try to read slow. Now here, what you're going to start to see here, I mentioned this the first night we did L&R, so I guess that would be last night. The heart of L&R, of love and responsibility, is the kind of juxtaposition and ultimately synthesis of 2 orders. The order of the person who is made for love and made not to be used, and the order of nature. And again, the order of nature, for someone who believes in the Creator, nature is not a bunch of bumpy molecules alone. Yeah, that's there, but it's ultimately the embodiment of divine wisdom and therefore has moral meaning. It's the embodiment of a divine idea. As this building first existed in the mind of an architect and was only later embodied in brick and mortar, so too, and if you want a catechism reference, Catechism 159, and this is how the great scientists thought of themselves. In studying the laws of nature, we're actually retracing God's thoughts after him. I tell my students, you should love chemistry. You should love physics if you put it in this creation context. So when you think about the order of nature, don't think simply of atoms in motion. Yes, of course that's there, but there's something thicker and more robust than that. Think of it as the embodiment of divine wisdom. We should have, the medievals love to say this. God gave us two books. The book of nature and the book of the Bible. Science then is studying the grammar and syntax of that book of nature. But it's a book and it has an author. It has an author. What he's going to say, and as a couple of quotes here are going to bear out, that if we undermine the natural order, we simultaneously undermine the personal order. That the two stand and fall and hang together. When a man and a woman within marriage consciously and freely choose sexual intercourse, then together with it, they choose at the same time the possibility of procreation. Only then do they place their sexual intercourse within marriage on the truly personal level. The order of love, the order of the person. Think about what we've been saying. Is it simply a union of bodies? Is it simply a union of emotional states? Or is it a union of persons? That's what he means here. The sexual intercourse of a man and a woman in marriage possess its full value of a personal union only when it contains the conscious acceptance of the possibility of parenting. This is the plain result of the synthesis of the two orders, the order of nature and the order of the person. So you'll notice in this book, this comes up at the beginning and at the end. It kind of bookends the whole book. And then the middle is all on the person. But the whole thing is driving at those two things coming together. Let me start with the... this moment is so important. So decisive that without it we cannot speak about the realization of the personal order in conjugal intercourse of a man and a woman. What would remain in place of the truth. See, here's the thing: is when that is positively excluded, the accent mark then devolves to pleasure, and then it becomes an act of using, and thereby the personal order is undermined. Again, I know it sounds graphic, it sounds harsh, but it really captures what he's getting at. Is married love, is it making love, and is it total self-gift, or does it devolve into mutual masturbation? Forgive the graphic image, but that's what he's getting at. What would remain in place of the truly personal union is only a sexual coming together that is not fully mature person. If the potential parental moment is positively excluded from the conjugal act, the reciprocal configuration of the persons partaking in this act is thereby changed. This change progresses from a union in love to a shared, or rather merely mutual, use. Once the parental moment is excluded from the conjugal intercourse, it shifts the reciprocal relation beyond the sphere of objective demands of a person's norm, which remember call this to not use and call this to love. Objectively speaking, nothing remains but use. So two, if you will, axioms he's going to put forth is any sexual activity again before marriage is ipso facto use, and then also, at least when you peer into it, a contracepted act of intercourse places the accent mark on pleasure and thereby on use and changes the dynamics of the act. Again, this is what we've been saying. Man can remain faithful to the person in the order of love proper to him insofar as he's faithful to nature. When he violates nature, he also violates the person by making him an object of use instead of an object of love. And he admits, it's much easier to see this insofar as we see the personal authority of the Creator behind the natural order. Again, frankly, we've got a lot of things that have been brewing for several centuries in terms of the history of ideas. But seeing nature as simply a blank slate of molecules in motion, I can give you a quote from René Descartes, back in the 17th century, where you say, seeing it that way makes nature simply something that we can simply manipulate at will, and as he puts it, become masters of nature. And you better believe that leads directly to the exploitation of the environment. Whereas from a classical creation perspective, yeah, technology is good, but we should work with and respect the intrinsic grammar and syntax of the natural order. This is part of what Pope Francis's Laudato Si was all about, and in fact, he drew the exact connection between care for the environment and respect for our bodies and the language written into the fabric of our bodies. The moral, when John Paul II speaks of the language of the body, what he means by that is the moral meaning of the natural order. We view things in a more robust way than simply atoms in motion. We've already said this, but when that happens, it shifts the whole lived experience towards sexual pleasure alone. Positive exclusion of this possibility contradicts not only the order of nature, but at the same time, love itself. See, this is part of what he uniquely proposes. Not only do you thwart the order of nature, you actually thwart the union of love. You actually thwart the personal order as well. For this exclusion makes sexual use itself the content of the conjugal act. And again, I think this is a separate, but I think we need to put it here. The proper greatness of the human person is expressed in the fact that sexual life means such a thorough justification. Why talk about this in this way? Because sex is holy. 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 Because of the majesty of the human person. That's why this is so important. Now let's cut right to the chase. So, a lot of times you'll hear, well, isn't NFP concept, aren't they the same thing? And my response is, well, then just use NFP. Like, well, that'd be totally different. I'm like, well, didn't you just say that they were the same? They might bring about the same end, but your reaction right there shows you that they are morally different. They might bring about the same end, but the means are not the same. Okay, so why would the church say NFP is superior to contraception, even if it brings about a similar end? Its secret, Wojtyła says, lies in practicing virtue. So really, I'll propose two reasons. One, it works with and not against the natural order. Two, it better fosters the personal order. Authentic love, self-mastery, virtue, non-sexual affection. Especially my unmarried guys in here. If every hug is simply a means to a sexual encounter, that's going to be a problem. So it works with, not against the natural order. It better fosters the personal order. In other words, which one is more befitting to human dignity? Which one better fosters virtue? Which one better fosters authentic love? Which one better fosters that personal order? The reason for the reaction to why not use NFP is because it would take that kind of self-mastery. It would take that kind of sacrifice. It would take that. And that right there belies the difference. Instead of asking which one is wrong, as if we're simply looking for the bare minimum, let's ask which way is more befitting to our dignity as persons? Which way more glorifies the Creator and expresses His intention for us to show love with our bodies? You know, we as Christians, we're not a political party. We're not just like one interest group among others. We are disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ. We should look different. And to the extent that we don't, that's probably a problem. What would it mean if Jesus is Lord of my mind, my heart, my entire life? I've given my entire life to Jesus. What does that mean for how I live out my sexuality? It has to mean something. It has to mean something if we're really going to go all in with our Lord. And at the end of the day, I've said this before, but for a Christian, my body is not my own. I am a steward of the gift that He's given me. I am not the absolute master to do with my body what I please. St. Paul is very clear on this in 1 Corinthians 6. What is it? In fact, even in the Screwtape letter, C.S. Lewis actually makes this exact same point through the mouth of the uncle demon Screwtape. He says, these silly creatures, if they knew that, the pulsating matter that is themselves. They didn't create it, they didn't bring it about, and it'll be ejected from them without their will. If they knew that, their hang-ups with chastity wouldn't be as difficult. If they recognize the fact that I am created, everything I have is a gift. I am a steward, not the owner of even my own body. Okay, so let's cut to the chase. Basic sexual principles. So we've said this prior to marriage, anything aimed at the arousal of the other is reserved for marriage. This includes some forms of kissing. Again, what is the point of intentionally arousing the other? Why start the engine if you're not going to Philadelphia? It's just teasing and mean, and you know you're going to get burned. You just know, right? I mean, like my priest friend, don't get mad that you didn't wake up to your alarm clock. Get mad that you didn't go to bed on time. The only way to win that battle is to win it 55 steps before the fall. And in conjunction with that, run to the throne of mercy again and again and again. And never, ever, as Pope Francis said, God never tires of forgiving us. We just get tired of asking. So it's that combination of being serious about avoiding the triggers, whether it's lying down on a couch with your significant other, or whether it's late at night. Everybody, you know your triggers. So if you really are serious, you avoid the triggers. And the second thing is, don't ever tire of coming to our Lord's mercy, because he will forgive again and again. And it's the evil one. It's the evil one that wants you to feel ashamed, especially if you're a Catholic leader. Oh, you cannot go back now. Are you kidding me? Every saint has got a past, and every sinner has got a future. Now, in general, and in marriage, a rightly ordered sexual act must be completed in the kind of act that is, of its nature, in principle, open to the possibility of procreation. That is, regardless of the timing of the act, say within a feet, or the particular people involved, say if one or the other is infertile. In other words, it must be the kind of act that by definition is in principle open to the possibility of life. Now, that particular act may not be because of the timing of the act or because of the people involved, but it must be completed in the kind of act that is in principle open to the possibility of life. And that then excludes masturbation, completed oral sex, same-sex acts, and contraceptive sexual acts. Now, they're all wrong for the exact same reason. I think we do ourselves a disservice, and I'm sure you see this readily, when we seem to or we give the perception of singling out a certain group. Why are same-sex acts wrong? For the same reason that masturbation is wrong. For the same reason that completed oral sex is wrong. For the same reason that a contraceptive act of sex is wrong. Because it must terminate in the kind of act that is in principle open to life. We need to show the consistency. In my experience with students, they're like, wow, I've never had it put that way. But they're all wrong for the exact same reason, and we do ourselves a disservice by making it seem like we're singling out one or the other. It's a holistic thing. It's about babies and bonding. It's about the moral meaning of the natural order. And to use our sexual acts in such a way that it terminates in the kind of act that is not open to life, that's where it becomes contrary to our Creator's intention. So, personal order, natural order, that synthesis is what Catholic sexual morality is all about. And again, if you want to take some of this and the entire LNR discussion, everything I've said is in the chapters in here. In terms of synthesize and all that stuff. If this is too much, if you want to take it with you, basically everything we've done, minus the bio, is all in here. Now, check this out. This is 1960. This is a bishop. He uses early on in the book this Latin word frui, by which he means that the joy that accompanies a rightly ordered action. Here he's speaking about climax. This is 1960. This is a bishop. From the viewpoint of loving another person from the position of altruism, it must be required that the conjugal act should serve not merely to reach the climax of sexual arousal on one side, that of a man, but happen in harmony. again, when you read this book, yes, you have a great mind, a great thinker, but you also have someone who talked to a lot of people, and it's commonly said a lot of women who heard from them very deeply. This falls, arousal in her case rises more slowly than in a man. A man should be aware of that, not because of hedonistic, but of altruistic motives. In this sphere, there is some rhythm bestowed by nature itself, and this rhythm should be sought and found by both spouses, so that the climax of sexual arousal takes place both in man and in woman, and that it occurs in as much as possible in both spouses at the same time. The subject of happiness that they then suffer together possesses plain pictures of that fruit, the joy proceeding from the conformity of actions with the objective order of nature. Now, are you surprised to hear about a bishop in 1960 talking about climax? Or maybe you're afraid to acknowledge your surprise. Here's the thing. If you are respecting the order of nature, can I say, and you're married, go play. Don't worry about it. It's not dirty. It's holy. You're glorifying the Lord in your body by making this act of self-gift. So again, everything I'm saying is predicated upon respecting the order of nature, so the act is completed in the kind of act that is in principle open to the possibility of life. Once that's in place, Wojtyla is going to say, enjoy the fruit, because the Lord, the Creator, put that joy that accompanies that act there for a reason. He wants us to do this. Just as there's a pleasure and a joy that accompanies eating, which is pretty necessary, so too here. And again, to appeal to Aquinas, I mentioned this, I think maybe the first or second, maybe it was last night. Classical philosophy would tell you this: look, eating serves the individual. It restores health to the body. Sex ultimately serves the common good, because it's oriented by its nature to family life and new offspring and new patrimony and generations. That's why it's so pack-ass word to make sex about me. It's a metaphysical monster that we've created by our sexualized culture. And again, I know we're so deep, we're so thick, we're like, that's just not normal. But friends, I mean, what's normal? C.S. Lewis in Mere Christianity has a little section when he's dealing with some of these issues. He says, well, someone might say, well, we have a sexualized culture, and he's writing this in 1940, 45 thereabouts, during the midst of World War II, because we're starved. He's like, well, okay, let's say I came across a culture that, brought out a food tray, and they just kind of all gather around and just worship the food. I might conclude that they were starving, but if I then turned around and watched them live and realized they're just stuffing themselves full meal after meal, then I'd recognize, no, they're not starving. There's a massive disorder going on here. I'd suggest something similar, because the sexual appetite is kind of unique in the sense that the more you feed it, the bigger it gets. It's a little bit different than hunger in that way. So, if you're struggling with this, just take it to prayer. What really should be normal, and if I may, draw a distinction between the normal and the natural. Normal is descriptive. Natural is prescriptive. Sin is normal, but it's not natural. It's not befitting to our rational nature. Does that make sense? Normal describes what's there. Natural proposes what should be there. So this kind of brings the whole, so let's maybe just recap briefly. So you've got, again, this movement of love. Attraction, is that bad? No. Remember sensuality? Sensuality is physical attraction. Is it bad? No. It just can't govern itself by itself. It can't run by itself. Affectivity, emotional attraction, is that bad? No. It's good. It has to be ordered, though, and brought into the whole. Authentic love brings about integration. where the act of the will is there, it is committed to the good of the other, and once you have that, not only is sensuality and affectivity not bad, it should be positively fostered. But the great challenge and task of love is the sensuality, the affectivity that gets out first, long before the will. The will takes time to catch up, and that's why love must be tested, love must be developed, love must be, remember what you said, sensuality, affectivity, attraction, physically, emotionally, those are not yet love, but the raw materials for love. The will must bring love out of them through its own creative contribution if you want a deep and lasting love. And then now we're here to the sexual issues. What he kind of culminates here, though, this I think is interesting, the way this whole section ends, is he turns to spiritual fatherhood and spiritual motherhood. Because at the end of the day, my kids, my 5 kids, they're not my kids. They're God's kids, and I'm here as the steward to help them get to their final end. Even those of us who are biological parents, the more important goal there is a spiritual paternity and a spiritual maternity. Fatherhood and motherhood in the world of persons are definitely not limited to the biological function of transmitting life. They reach much deeper. Fatherhood and motherhood in the world of persons are the mark of a particular spiritual perfection, which always consists in some generation of the spiritual sense in forming souls. And obviously this is quintessentially embodied in our priests, in our religious. But here's the thing. If an organism, a biological organism, is mature when it can what? Reproduce. A Christian is mature when he or she can make other disciples. When it doesn't just stay inside of you, but you're ready to pass it on and become a spiritual father or mother. Spiritual generation is a symptom of the person's maturity into some fullness, both of which one wills to give to others. So it seeks children, other people, especially the younger, who will receive what it wants to give. And those who receive become an object of a particular love, similar to the love of parents for their children. Again, in a sense, because what became mature in the spiritual father or mother will live on in them. Spiritual kinship based on bonds of souls is often stronger than the kinship that results from the bonds of blood alone. Spiritual fatherhood or motherhood contains some transmission of personhood. And he's going to say, basically, well, here, this last one. This is an end to which every man, a man and a woman, is called in some way. Every one of us, not just priests and nuns, every one of us is called to spiritual fatherhood and motherhood. And in so doing, we attain a likeness to God the Creator when this primarily spiritual fatherhood or motherhood, whose archetype is God, is also formed in Him. And yes, we call God Father, but the perfections of both fatherhood and motherhood, as the Catechism says early on, every perfection in the created order pre-exists in a preeminent way in God Himself. And so in the act of spiritual fatherhood and motherhood, we attain and participate in a likeness of the Creator of God Himself. God who is triune, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. God who is communion. See, if you want to get to TOB, theology of the body, it's all that we've been talking about, but in a much more overtly theological context, looking at everything we're talking about in light of God as Trinity and being made in the image and likeness of a God who is triune. I can take some questions afterward if you'd like on this. We have a break coming up. Let's make a closing prayer real quick in the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit, as it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit.